Hello everyone, my name is Jacob Draper. I work for Northern Arizona University and I am the project manager and pilot in command for Green Drone Arizona. Today I'm going to be covering Module 2 titled Liftoff UAV Technology. We're going to be covering topics such as what is a UAV, what are the different types of UAVs, how are they used, and how do we develop a safe and compliant flight to complete our operation. So what is a UAV? Keep that in mind whenever we start looking at these next couple slides. So do we think this is a UAV? Could be, right? I don't know. What about this one? Do we think this is a UAV? Is this a UAV? Let's assume that there's 2 seats in that cockpit. Does that mean that this is a UAV? So to answer those questions, a UAV is an unmanned aerial vehicle. That means that the aircraft has no pilot on board. The UAV can be either controlled manually or flown autonomously, meaning we're programming a flight and it's completing that flight without us interfering with the controls. A UAV per FAA Part 107 requirement states that the entire drone must weigh less than 55 pounds. That means we're talking about the aircraft body, the legs, the props, the gimbal. The gimbal is what is on the bottom of the drone holding on to the camera. It includes the camera, any additional sensors that you've added on. All of that needs to be less than 55 pounds when you take off. So for a small drone like this, that's not a problem. But when we start getting into these large drones, or if you're getting into a drone that's carrying something, that's where that 55 pounds comes into play. Some other names for UAVs: drone, obviously, UAS, unmanned aerial systems, multicopter. So this drone on this slide is considered a multicopter. It is considered a quadcopter. It has 4 props. There is hexacopters, octocopters. We also have fixed-wing drones. So think of that as an airplane. And we have hybrids. Hybrids, also referred to as VTOLs, vertical takeoff and landing. Those I would like to think of as the military aircraft an Osprey. So they take off vertically, those props tip over, and this flies like an airplane. So what are some of the pros and cons to these different types of drones? Well, for the multicopter, they're very versatile. They're user-friendly, and they're relatively inexpensive. So user-friendly being they're not super hard to control. The drone will hover in space, and what I mean by in space is just at any location above ground level, basically. You don't have to try to control it and keep it balanced. It will do that for you. Relatively inexpensive. Most of these beginner and intermediate models are just a couple $1,000s. We can use these drones inside and outside. So if we decided that we wanted to fly the inside of a warehouse, we could do that. Ideal for smaller projects. So like I said, the warehouse, or if we wanted to fly a windmill, or if we wanted to circle a building, a multicopter would be ideal for that type of project. Some cons to multicopters, one of which is battery life. I like to think of it as you're pretty much going to get 20 to 30 minutes out of your standard multicopter. So you don't have a lot of time. You got to make sure everything's planned out to get your operation complete. Again, not ideal for large projects. Pros for the fixed wing there in the middle. They have a long flight time. It's not uncommon for them to be over an hour long. They're ideal for large projects. So a large project could be maybe a transmission line that's going across your state. You're not going to use a multicopter for that. You could use a fixed wing though. Decreased survey time. So because these have a long flight time and they typically do fly faster to stay in flight, our survey time is decreased. Some cons to a fixed wing would be landing can damage sensors or the cameras. So in the fixed wing, On the bottom of the aircraft, we have these sensors and we have our camera. And so when we go to launch a fixed wing, we physically throw that in the air. You know, the prop starts in the back, we throw it, and it takes off. But when it comes back, you're not catching that thing. So we have to land it on the ground. But when we land it on the ground, the belly of the aircraft can become damaged. And what's on the belly of the aircraft? Our sensors and our camera. So over time, where if you have a bad landing, that can cause some serious damage to your sensors and your camera. Like I said, it requires the pilot to throw in order to start the flight. That could be dangerous, it could scare people, it could be daunting. They are traditionally more expensive. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars for a fixed wing, and we can't use these inside of a building. The VTOL or the hybrid, they're on the right. Some pros for that: they can cover everything from smaller projects to large projects. They do have a longer flight time, not as long as the fixed wing, but they can still fly for about an hour, over an hour, just over an hour probably. Again, decreased survey time, user-friendly. User-friendly being we don't have to physically throw the drone to start our flight. Takes off like a helicopter or like the multi-copter. The props tip over and then it flies like an airplane. They are expensive. They're not quite as expensive as our fixed wings, but don't be sticker shocked if you see a couple, or I should say, $20,000–$30,000. So that's sort of the differences, the pros and cons to each of these styles of drones. In our project in Green Drone, Arizona, we are only using multi-copters at this point in time. So I kind of want to focus on multi-copters as we progress through this presentation. So again, because this is we're using multi-copters, this example is of a multi-copter and the physics of flight, and I should say the physics that occur while the multi-copter is in flight. And so I have a short video that we'll try to watch, and that covers or gives kind of a brief explanation as to how these multi-copters can hover and how they move in the air. So unfortunately, I cannot have this video displayed on my screen during this presentation, but please feel free to click on the slide itself or follow the link on the next slide, and you'll actually be able to watch this short video. It's only about 1.5 minutes. So here's the link to that YouTube video in case you want to check it out on your own. It is a short video, but I think it generally gets the point across. I don't want to dive too deep into the physics of flight, but it's a good little video. So what are some drone applications? Some current applications being construction management, tower inspections. They're used for engineering, 3D modeling of structures, search and rescue, police department, wildfires, vegetation monitoring, water sampling. We're sort of getting to the point where you name it, you can do it with a drone. And a lot of times it's safer to use a drone than it is to use an individual, say to go down into an open pit mine or a rock quarry to assess maybe the slope of the sides of your pit. We can use a drone to assess that. So who wants to fly drones? I know I do. Well, first we need to decide, are we going to be flying as a recreational user or as a commercial user? A recreational user, as defined by the FAA, means that you are flying your drone for fun. That means you are not going out and flying your drone with the intent of selling images or being paid while you're flying. Recreational users don't have to take an exam as of right now. There are, I should say, the FAA and their stakeholders are going over what will be required in the recreational test. So as of right now, you can go out, you can buy a drone, you register it, and boom, you go out and you start flying. Once they complete this knowledge test and they start requiring everybody to take this test, then you'll have to take the test before you can fly. This test will not be the same as the FAA Part 107 exam, so for commercial users. This is going to be different because recreational drones can weigh more than 55 pounds. So that's sort of the recreational side. So how do we become a commercial drone pilot? And I am considered a commercial drone pilot. So a commercial user means that you're not just flying for fun. You're either your employer is making you go fly a drone, so you're being paid, or you're a photographer trying to sell images that you've captured with your drone. Maybe you want to be paid to film a wedding. That would be a commercial use. A knowledge test is required. Again, this is the FAA Part 107 exam. You must be 16 years of age at the time of the exam. There's study material available through the FAA. There's also several practice exams that you can find for free online. After passing the knowledge exam, you'll receive a license, which is what the top right image looks like. That's actually what I have. Has some of your details on there, and it's a physical card, just like a driver's license. You must renew your license every 2 years. So for example, I took my test 2018, I think in August. So I have to renew mine by August of this year. And it just keeps going. Then once you register your drone, you're good to go and fly commercially. So I want to go over sort of the step-by-step process for preparing for flights. I found this online, this little checklist here, and it's pretty good. So I wanted to use this to kind of walk you through the steps of everything that we need to make sure that we have so that we are compliant as well as being safe to perform our operation. So first of all is going to be flying conditions. So flying conditions, we got to check our airspace. So we look at this image here and we go, holy moly, what is this? This is a mess. And yes, the first time I looked at one of these, I thought there's no way I'm going to be able to take and pass this test. So this is called an aeronautical chart. What it does is it shows us the airspace at a specific location. So if we look up towards the sort of the middle-ish left, we can see that there's an airport there. That airport is Pittsburgh. And those rings that circle the airport, let's see if I can do this. The rings that circle the airport are basically different shelves. You can think of airspace as an upside down wedding cake or an upside down tiered cake. So it starts out sort of narrow, and then we start getting our bigger tiers as we get towards the base that's inverted. So this inside circle here, we can see that it says SFC, and above that it says 80. So what that means is from the surface to 8,000 feet is controlled airspace. That means that if we were to have to fly a drone in that area, we would have to obtain an authorization to fly because controlled airspace starts at the surface. As we move into the next tier or the next ring, we see that it says 25, and then above that it says 80 as well. So again, that top ceiling is 8,000 feet. The bottom, or the floor, of controlled airspace is 2,500 feet. So controlled airspace starts at 2,500 feet and it goes to 8,000 feet. So if we wanted to fly our drone at 300 feet, we're not flying within controlled airspace. You would still have to go through your measures to make sure that you are staying compliant. And if, depending on the airport, they do require you to obtain authorization. A lot of times that can be done through different apps, and your authorization is issued in seriously seconds to minutes. But I'm just showing you that controlled airspace is from 2,500 feet to 8,000 feet. And then as we move out, we can see if we're going down here towards the, kind of towards the middle left, a little bit towards the bottom, we see 80, and then under that is 40. So controlled airspace starts at 4,000 feet and goes to 8,000 feet. So that's how we can read these aeronautical charts. There's much more involved in an aeronautical chart, but the important part I wanted to show everybody is just where that controlled airspace is. Thankfully, we don't always have to check our aeronautical charts. If you can imagine trying to look at an aeronautical chart and you only want to fly, let's say, a 50 yard by 50 yard area, it would be very hard for you to pinpoint where that is on an aeronautical chart. So we have these apps that you can download on your phone, on your tablet. Some of these apps are called AirMap, Before You Fly, Kitty Hawk. There's several others. And basically, they look like this image. And once you get in there, you can see what the airspace is where you're trying to fly. So in this example over here, I have this red arrow pointed, and let's say we wanted to fly that golf course right there. What would our airspace be, or where does controlled airspace start? And the answer to that is it's at 100 feet. So at 100 feet, we are flying in controlled airspace. I can tell you that Falcon Field is the airport that is closest to me, and even if we wanted to fly at 30 feet, we would still have to obtain authorization. It's issued very quickly. And just because we obtain authorization, let's say to fly 150 feet to cover this golf course, it doesn't mean that every aircraft that's in the air is aware that you're flying your drone there. So you still have to yield to manned aircraft. That means your head's got to be on a swivel, you're looking around while maintaining view of your drone. You must maintain view or visual observation of your drone. So some other airspace, I wanted to pull up some types of restrictions. So this area here is down by Yuma. It's actually by Welton, which is just a little bit north and east of Yuma. So in this example, this is special use airspace. And it says right there, it's Barium Goldwater Air Force Range. So military property can cause a restriction. Why would that be? Why wouldn't military property allow us to fly a drone, even if this is out in the middle of nowhere? Well, to be honest, we don't know. Are they flying, are they flying jets around? Are they flying helicopters around? Are they firing rounds? That's things that we have to take into consideration. It may seem like it's out in the middle of nowhere, but we also don't know what's going on within that airspace. Sporting events. So we have Chase Field, Diamondbacks are playing, and you're like, shoot, I don't want to pay for a seat. I'm going to take my drone and I'm going to fly up on top above the stadium there, and I want to get some pictures of the game that's going on. Why would that not be allowed? And this is a type of restriction, not special use, but they would issue a type of restriction above Chase Field. But why? Well, imagine you have everybody inside of the stadium. You have your players, you have everybody who's working and attending this event. And you fly over the stadium, and all of a sudden you lose connection, or your drone catastrophically fails, falls from the sky, and hits somebody. That's exactly why they don't want you to be flying above a sporting event. Wilderness areas, that's designated as you cannot fly. That means you can't fly, um, launch your drone from inside of a wilderness. It also means that you can't launch from outside of the wilderness and fly into the wilderness. So wilderness areas are, you cannot fly a drone at all. Wildfires. So we have a wildfire going on. It's by your grandparents' house, and you're up visiting them, and you want to take some pictures of this wildfire that's rolling in. Why wouldn't you be able to fly your drone? This is a huge problem, actually, because I used to work for the Forest Service. I was on several fires, and so was Justin. Justin still works for the Forest Service, and he still attends fires. It's a big issue because people try to capture images of wildfires going on because it's interesting. It's something going on. This is going to be a sweet picture. Well, people don't realize that not only do we have airplanes, and I'm talking about big airplanes, to small airplanes, to helicopters of various sizes, to even drones that are being flown by people fighting the fire. If you put your drone in the air, you're putting a lot of lives at risk. And then they have to put all aircraft on the ground that are helping fight this fire because your drone's in the air. So now there's no longer any more aircraft helping put out the fire because you had your drone in the air. So it's a huge issue. So what are some other types of events or other examples that you can think of that would cause an airspace restriction? Another one that I did not list is elected officials. So, for example, if I wanted to fly tomorrow and the president was in town, there would be a temporary flight restriction, a TFR, issued for the entire valley. And if you went onto AirMap, which is what we're viewing here, if you went onto AirMap and you tried to fly, it would not let you because there is an elected official in your area. So weather. Holy smokes, I thought the aeronautical chart was bad. I know. So this is called a Terminal Aerodrome Forecast, a TAF. Before you complete your operation, you would want to check this report one day prior. This is the most accurate weather forecast for your location. I'm not going to go over this whole thing. So KMEM and the KOKC, that's the abbreviation for the airport. So OKC being Oklahoma City. KMEM might be Memphis. Don't quote me on that. So I'll read off the first line here. And what we're looking at is this was created on the 12th day at 1720 Zulu time. This report or this line goes from the 12th day at 1800 to the 13th day at 2400. We have wind at 200 degrees. That's the direction of the wind. Coming in at 12 knots. Visibility is 5 statute miles. There's haze. It's broken at 3,000 square feet. There's a probability of 40% at 2022. There's going to be one visibility or 1 statute mile visibility. So that probability of 40% goes for the TSRA, which is thunderstorm rain showers, overcast of 800 feet, cumulonimbus clouds. Cumulonimbus clouds meaning those are the types of clouds where you would experience thunder and lightning. So that's how we would read this. There's obviously, if you look through this, you can start seeing that maybe SHRA stands for rain showers. There's all kinds of things in this report, and it can be very complicated to read. The importance of checking the weather, and you can do this just by checking the weather channel for your location where you plan to fly, is you want to make sure that the weather is going to, or is acceptable for the piece of equipment that you're using. Not all drones can withstand the same types of weather, whether that's heat or cold, but especially wind. Here in Arizona, especially in the valley where it is hot, our big concerns are going to be temperature, and then occasionally we're going to have some wind. As we get into monsoon season, we definitely want to make sure that if we are flying, we want to do that earlier in the morning because we don't want to have our drone in the air whenever a thunderstorm rolls in. So we got our flying conditions out of the way. So next up is going to be our documentation that we need to have with us, and also the laws, whether that be local, state, that we need to abide by. So some of these images I'm going to explain as I start reading off some of this text. So an FAA certificate of authorization. This is an authorization that I obtained for the project site, the Lower Salt River Restoration Project site. So this is an authorization that I actually received from the FAA. And this is saying basically, based on the parameters that you've entered, saying that you're going to fly for this long at this height, this aircraft, you're good to go. City and county documentation. So every city differs. Some cities they have not implemented drone laws yet, but some cities do have drone laws, and some counties do have laws that require you to submit something prior to flying your drone. Aircraft registration. The bottom picture is an example of the registration that we have that is current for our DJI Phantom 4 multispectral. Registration is good for 3 years. That needs to be on, or I should say with you. You need to have your registration with you. You would also need to have that certificate of authorization with you as well. And then the big one is your pilot's license. So that card that they issue you after passing your test, you need to have that card with you as well. So we've covered our local drone operation laws. That would be the city, the county, even the state if the state had something. And then required documentation being our registration. We have our pilot's license and our certificate of authorization. So the physical state of the drone would be next. So if we're checking our equipment, this is a picture of basically what you could be buying if you bought something from DJI. Depending on the package that you pick, all of this equipment would come with your setup. So what we want to inspect prior to flying would be our aircraft body. Do we have any cracks in the arms of the aircraft? Are the legs okay? Are they flimsy? Do they need to be replaced? The payload, which is the gimbal, the camera. Make sure that your gimbal can move. Make sure that your camera is not cracked. Make sure that it's securely on. Some of these drones, they don't have built-in cameras, so you can actually replace the camera. So make sure that that's secure. Batteries, let's check our batteries. Are they damaged? Are they leaking? Rotors, make sure our rotors can spin freely. Check our props. Are the props cracked? Did you hit something? Do we need to switch out props? And then our remote controller. Really, the only thing on the remote controller is, are the control sticks, do they move? Are they not broken? And are our antennas, to make sure that we're connecting to the aircraft while in flight, are they broken? Are they cracked in half? Make sure that that's intact. So understanding the controller, I'm not going to get too terribly in depth, but basically we have our antennas, our left control stick controls the vertical movement of the drone, meaning we can make it go up, we can make it go down, and then we can also make it yaw, which is actually turning in place. We have buttons on the back of the controller where we can start recording a video, we can start capturing images, quick access to camera settings, and that would be your C1 and C2 buttons. Those are custom, or customizable I should say, so you can customize those to your liking. But that is the general or the overview of the controller. The last thing I'll mention is at the bottom of the controller, just below your display holder, there's a button for return to home. And that means if something comes up, let's say your battery's starting to die, if you press return to home, the drone will fly back to where it initially took off from, and it'll land there. So we've checked our physical state of the drone, we've checked everything else. We just need to make sure our firmware is good. So if we went into the DJI Flight app and we wanted to fly this DJI Phantom 4 Pro, this little red banner at the top, if our firmware was consistent with the most updated version, it would say updated version or something along those lines, and it would allow you to click on Go Fly down in the bottom right corner. If this red banner comes up and it says that we have an inconsistent firmware, we have to update that before we're able to take off. The app physically will not let you take off until you update your firmware. Now the firmware needs to be updated for not only the aircraft body itself, but it will also update the controller. This is extremely important to constantly check your drone before you go fly, because they don't really tell you whenever these updates are going to come about. So you want to make sure that you check before you go fly to make sure that you have the most updated firmware, because if you don't, you can use a whole battery just updating firmware. And if you went out into the field, if let's say you drove an hour to get to this location for a 15-minute flight, man, that would stink. So it's always important to make sure that your firmware is updated. So we've checked our flying conditions. Weather is good. We're flying not in controlled airspace. We have our certificate of authorization. We have all of our documentation. The drone looks good. The firmware is updated. And now it's time to go fly. So now we could go out into the field and we could complete our operation. These are two websites. I'm going to go through a little activity. So first of all, I'm going to go through AirMap, and I'm going to go through DroneDeploy. DroneDeploy being we're going to use that for our autonomous flight. So AirMap, once you log into AirMap, this is what you would be able to see. These are the different airspaces within the valley. The centermost being Sky Harbor. The red areas being wilderness areas or temporary flight restrictions. So this is the Superstition Wilderness. I clicked on this, and that's why it's highlighted with the yellow border. This is telling us that it is wilderness. We would not be able to fly inside of this area. Somewhere that's a little bit more familiar with everybody, I hope, would be Tempe Town Lake. We have the stadium towards the bottom center, and Papago Park just up there. So at Tempe Town Lake, like I said before, this is going to tell us what our controlled airspace elevate, or where controlled airspace starts. So if we wanted to fly over Sun Devil Stadium, we can go into AirMap and we can say, okay, I want to fly over Sun Devil Stadium, and it looks like right here that controlled airspace starts at 100 feet. That's good to know. And we're going to follow up by programming a flight over Sun Devil Stadium. So keep that in mind. Controlled airspace starts at 100 feet. So step one of going into drone deploy, we want to program an autonomous flight so that we can say we're going to recreate a 3D structure of Sun Devil Stadium. So this is what it looks like as soon as we get into drone deploy. Once we say create project here, it's going to come up with an automatic little square grid that it's just a general flight plan, but we can manipulate that to fit whatever we need. So step two, the basic square didn't actually come out to be this shape or this size. I just turned it, sort of exploded it a little bit just because it was only covering a portion of the actual field. We want to cover the entire stadium, and we want to recreate a 3D model of this stadium. So we have flight altitude here on our left. I set the flight altitude to 100 feet. We're going to assume that none of these structures are over 100 feet or at 100 feet. That would jeopardize us colliding with an object. But that's where we would change our flight altitude. The little mountain with the arrow that's right next to 100 feet on the left, if that is checked, that is supposed to be a terrain awareness sort of function. Basically, if we wanted to fly over an area that had a lot of hills, the software would try its best to maintain that 100 feet as we go up and over these hills. If that's unselected, then it's going to fly, your drone is going to take off, it's going to go to 100 feet above ground level, and it's going to maintain that, and then your hills would be rolling underneath it. So next we would want to go to advanced down at the bottom. And once we get into advanced, we would want to uncheck our automatic settings. So that way we can customize our flight. Front overlap, it's all dependent upon your flight, but our front overlap is going to be how much of an overlap is there between each picture. Side overlap, same thing. We're moving to the side, how much of an overlap is there? Depending on what you're trying to do, you may want to increase your overlap. That way you have more tie points, or there's more consistency between photos. The software can pick up similarities, and we can lay those photos out appropriately. So that's where our overlap is. Flight direction would be the direction of the grid that you can see there in the picture. That's all that changes. Mapping flight speed, it's going to come up with an automatic mapping flight speed. We're going to leave that flight speed. We're not going to change that. Starting waypoint, where it says start there on sort of the top left of the grid, starting waypoint, we could change that so that the drone starts wherever you decide that you want it to start from. Perimeter 3D, if that is checked, which it is here, that means that the drone is actually going to fly around the perimeter of this grid and take pictures at the end. That will enhance with creating a 3D reconstruction of this stadium. Crosshatch, meaning we're flying, say, north and south, and then the drone is going to fly east and west. Again, we're getting different angles of the objects of interest, and that helps with reconstructing a 3D model of this stadium. So we would want to have that checked in order to create a 3D model of the stadium. Obstacle avoidance, the drone will tell you if it's about to hit something. It's going to beep crazy. You're going to know. So that would be how we would set up our flight to fly over Sun Devil Stadium. So then once we have all of our parameters set, we would go drive out there, we would launch, and actually down here on the bottom right, where it says connect drone. Once you turn the drone on, it'll say drone connected, and then it'll say something along the lines of pre-flight checklist. You would click on that. It makes sure that the software is reading everything from the drone, vice versa. And once everything checks green, you would hit fly, and the drone takes off automatically, and you don't have to control it. If, for whatever reason, you are flying an area that cannot be covered with one battery, you would have to bring the drone back in, change out the battery, and once you hit resume flight, the drone will take back off. It will go back to the last checkpoint that it saved, and it'll resume your flight from there and complete it. Then once your flight is complete, we can go back into the computer and we can upload all of these images for processing. So what is an orthomosaic? And that's one thing that would be completed or that we could derive from the photos that we captured at Sun Devil Stadium. So we went out to Sun Devil Stadium, we flew, we want to create a 3D model, but maybe we also want to create an orthomosaic. Orthomosaic being we're taking all of these images, and let's assume that there's 437 like in this example, taking all of those images and we're stitching them together. And that's where that overlap is. We're taking this image, there was this much of an overlap, we're stitching them together so that once we're done creating this orthomosaic, we have this big image here on the right that allows us to view our entire area that we just surveyed in great detail. So that is what an orthomosaic is. We went out to this particular high school, we flew over their football field, and then we came back in. We uploaded all of these images into Pix4D, which is a photogrammetry software which can create these 3D models and orthomosaics. And this is the orthomosaic that was produced from that. Looking at this at a first glance, you might say, I don't know, this looks kind of blurry a little bit maybe. But once you really blow this up, it's amazing how much detail you can tell compared to satellite imagery, and I'm going to show everybody that a little bit later. So the importance or the benefits of an orthomosaic is we can measure true distances. Because this is orthorectified, it's a true image of Earth. We can measure real distances. So if we went out to fly the drone at Sun Devil Stadium and we said, okay, this bleacher seat is, let's say, 12 inches wide. Well, whenever we pull up our orthomosaic, we should be able to draw a line across that bench seat, that bleacher seat, and it'll be close to 12 inches. We can calculate volumes, whether that be a pile of something or it's an excavation. We can determine the volume that was removed or the volume of material that's sitting on the surface. We can capture progress shots of, say, construction sites. We can model buildings, or in our case that we keep talking about, Sun Devil Stadium, agricultural assessments, natural resource monitoring. There's so many benefits of an orthomosaic. So here's, we're going to assume all these images are orthomosaics, or we're just, we can assume that they're just pictures taken from a drone. But there's so many benefits from viewing an image like this. This looks like maybe a mining site or concrete facility, something like that, rock quarry. But some of the things that we can see from here, we are getting the big picture. We can see if there's any hazards. We can check people, especially for safety. We can see if there is damage to a road. There's a lot of benefits of seeing this big picture versus just seeing what you can see on the ground or driving around. Here's a construction site. Looks like they're building multiple high-rises. So we can take progress shots from basically groundbreaking all the way up until these buildings are complete. Again, we can check the safety of people. We can check to make sure that everything is in the right place. We can see if there's any hazards that are maybe not completely visible from ground level. So that's important. So here's an example of solar field inspection. So we have all these solar panels. This was taken from the Pix4D website. These little gray squares, those were our images with our overlap. They're all stitched together. And then in the back, what we're seeing is a thermal orthomosaic that was produced from our flight. And if we were to zoom in far enough, or if there were faulty panels or portions of the panel, we would be able to tell, and we would be able to go out and make those repairs. Why is that? Why use a drone? Why not just drive around and check these? Well, it's extremely time consuming. If you guys know anything about solar fields, some of these can be thousands of acres. And trying to drive around and actually manually check these panels is extremely time consuming. We can go out with a drone, we can fly this, let's say it takes a couple days. You fly the whole thing, and then in a matter of a few days, we can tell where we have faulty panels, and then we can go out and make those repairs. So extremely beneficial, not only cost savings, but time as well. Agriculture, this is an NDVI image. This pertains directly to vegetation. What this is telling us is these areas of red might need a little bit of some love. So these red areas, they could be areas that are not receiving enough water. They could be areas that are not receiving enough fertilizer or pesticides, herbicides. So as a farmer, and this is your business, being able to get a bird's eye view of the health of your vegetation or of your crop is extremely important. So we can use this for vineyards, we can use this for, say, corn, hay, barley, and we can go out and we can fly and we can say, okay, we need to make these adjustments right now. That way we can maximize our profit. So this is another area where having these orthomosaics is extremely beneficial. So image resolution, this just refers to the number of pixels in an image. This example here is it's a great example. So here on the left we have 10 pixels per inch. That means we have 10 pixels across the x-axis. We have 10 pixels across the y-axis. Our image is very blocky or pixelated. As we move into the middle image here, we have 20 pixels per inch. Again, 20 pixels across the x-axis and 20 pixels across the y-axis. Our image is getting clearer, but it's still pixelated. But look what happens whenever we get to this right image. We have 100 pixels per inch. That means we have 10,000 total pixels in this 1 square inch. Our images, it looks really great. So if we wanted to say look at vegetation, or if we wanted to look at sidewalks or something where we really have to zoom in to see what we want, the detail that we want to get out of this image, it's important to have high resolution. That's where I'm getting with this. So what is spatial accuracy? Well, spatial accuracy, and we can kind of tie this back to our resolution a little bit, but first of all, we can say that the image captured or displayed here on the right is more clear. We can assume that the resolution is better. Spatial accuracy now, so satellite imagery, if we go onto Google Earth, or if you pull out your phone and you go onto Google Maps, your accuracy is about 10 feet. So give or take, you're about 10 feet off. So I created this image, and what I'm trying to show you, and I tried to get this to be almost the exact scale The image on the left is satellite. The image on the right is an image that was captured with the drone. The image on the left, it's not terrible, but we can't really make out any detail. Now, if we look at the image on the right, we can see, and you can even zoom in further, we can actually see footprints inside of this long jump pad or pit, and we can even see where there's areas where the sand is a little bit more firm. We can even make out some of the tread that's inside of these footprints, and that's top-notch resolution, and also our spatial accuracy is much higher. Higher meaning we may have a 2-inch spatial resolution or spatial accuracy versus the 10 feet that we have with satellite imagery. Again, this is another example, NAPE imagery versus UAV. This is tied to spatial accuracy. NAPE imagery has a 1 meter, approximate 1 meter spatial accuracy. The imagery that's displayed on the right is imagery that we collected at the Lower Salt River Restoration Project site. This imagery has a resolution of about, I think it's 3.2 or 3.3 inches per pixel. So again, NAPE imagery, 1 meter per pixel, and the UAV about, we'll just say 3 inches per pixel. So we can really zoom in before everything starts getting pixelated. We can see everything in much greater detail. What is temporal resolution? So temporal resolution, this all has to tie back to, especially if we're getting our imagery from satellites, temporal resolution refers to how often this is going to be collected, so the length of time that it takes for a satellite to complete its orbit cycle before we can get our imagery again. So I don't know if any of you spend much time on Google Earth, sometimes you'll see that your imagery is updated sometimes twice a year, sometimes once a year, sometimes it's a few years before that imagery is updated. And that's what this temporal resolution is about. Same thing with Google Earth, like I said, and even NAPE imagery. NAPE imagery is flown, like Justin said, once every 2 years, or it's obtained. You are able to gather that imagery once every 2 years. So a lot of things change, and they don't just change based on a yearly scale, but everything, especially related to vegetation, changes on a seasonal basis, right? So what vegetation looks like during the spring is much different than what things are going to look like in the fall. And having a UAV or being able to use UAV to collect imagery, we can go out during the different seasons, collect our imagery, and we have that and we can compare. So we have a higher or an increased temporal resolution with UAVs. So this is just an example of the importance of temporal resolution when trying to perform remote sensing of vegetation. So again, on the left we have the spring, so everything's starting to green up. We roll into summer, fall, and then at the end we have winter. So using or being able to use a UAV to collect this imagery during different times of the growing season, we can better assess what's going on in the environment. And that's why being able to use a UAV for the Lower Salt River Restoration Project is extremely important. We don't want to be waiting years to get new imagery when we're constantly doing work out there. So that's all I have for Module 2. I hope everybody learned something. Here's some references in case anybody wants to do a little bit more research. 2 and 4 are directly to the FAA regarding recreational and commercial users. And then number 3 being the physics of flight, in case anybody's interested in digging a little bit deeper into that. So hope everybody enjoyed Module 2, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.